I sat across from my college friend Zhao Qing at a hot pot restaurant, watching her snort laugh as she held up her phone to show me her father's chaotic family WeChat group, filled with repetitive health articles and petty family gossip. Ugh, my dad spams this group every single day. Can't escape it even at work, she grumbled, scrolling through the endless stream of 99 plus unread messages. I forced a thin smile and nodded along, but my chest tightened instantly. I'd never once been added to any family group chat belonging to my own father, Zhou Jiangwo. I'd spent years assuming my aging dad couldn't figure out how to operate WeChat group functions, too clumsy with modern smartphones to create a shared chat for our blood family. I'd buried the tiny, stinging doubt deep down, convincing myself his sporadic cold calls and distant holiday greetings were just awkward grief from losing my mom 8 years prior. That naive illusion shattered completely 3 days later when my father's name popped up on my work phone screen, his tone unnervingly warm and soft, warm enough it made my skin prickle with unease. Minmin, you free this weekend? Dad needs to talk something important over dinner. Minmin, he had called me by my childhood nickname once since my mother Lu Fang's funeral back in late 2017. 8 full years of radio silence, distant one-sentence holiday check-ins, and suddenly he's acting like a doting father the second a massive demolition check lands in his bank account. I'm sitting at my office desk, staring at half-finished design drafts the client has rejected 4 times running, mentally replaying every cold, empty New Year's Eve I'd spent at his house since he remarried Wang Xiumei 3 months after Mom's funeral. Every single holiday, I'd show up with homemade desserts and gifts, only to be treated like a random guest dragged into a foreign household. Wang Xiumei would hog the kitchen, my stepsister Zhou Xue sprawled across the sofa monopolizing the television, and my dad would only glance up from his phone long enough to throw out a half-hearted, "Work going okay?" before diving straight back into typing rapid-fire group chat replies. I'd always brushed off the loneliness as unavoidable grief, told myself dad was just lonely and needed someone to take care of him after mom passed. Mom's final words to me before her illness worsened were always, "Your father can't stand being alone. Don't hold his choices against him." I held on to that gentle advice for 8 years, swallowing every slight, every ignored text, every uninvited family gathering, until his awkward, evasive line hit my ears over the phone that afternoon. Our old family neighborhood's being torn down for redevelopment. Compensation funds just came through. We should all gather to sort out the distribution, and I finished renovating a brand new apartment. Come to my housewarming banquet next Saturday. He deliberately dodged my direct question about the exact compensation amount, stammering and shifting topics instantly, refusing to name a single number. I hung up the call, pulled up his public WeChat moments without a word. His latest post, uploaded 3 days prior, featured a sprawling modern living room with floor-to-ceiling windows and an oversized leather sofa Zhou Xue bragged she'd personally picked out. The comments section overflowed with warm back and forth between him, Wang Xiumei, and Zhou Xue, zero mention of my existence anywhere. Scrolling backward through 8 full years of posts, I found the very last photo referencing me or mom, a single black and white funeral portrait of Lu Fang, uploaded the day we buried her in December 2017. 8 years of new family photos, trips, celebrations, home renovations, and expensive purchases. I'd been completely erased from his digital life, wiped clean like I'd never existed. Mid-chapter investigation beat, uncovering the $5.12 million demolition settlement, 960-word marker, second plot twist setup. I made plans to meet Zhao Qing for lunch the next afternoon, hoping to gently fish for details about the neighborhood demolition without tipping my hand that I'd been kept entirely in the dark. Zhao Qing's father worked alongside mine for decades at the same factory, so he'd definitely heard all the local gossip about the payout numbers. We chatted casually about my grueling design workload for half an hour before I casually tossed out a throwaway line about the old residential block being demolished. Zhao Qing's eyes lit up instantly, spilling the secret without hesitation. "You didn't know? Negotiations wrapped up last year. Your dad's unit got the highest compensation package on the entire street." I leaned forward slightly, keeping my voice neutral. "Exactly how much was the total settlement?" She hesitated for a split second, glancing around the restaurant to make sure no acquaintances were within earshot. "I can't quote the exact figure, but my dad said a huge chunk of the money traces back to your mother's property, something left to her by her maternal grandmother." She cut herself off mid-sentence, clamping her mouth shut and refusing to elaborate further, clearly warned by her father not to meddle in my family's messy internal affairs. I didn't push her to reveal more, wrapping up our meal early and heading straight home to pull up the official demolition notice published on the local street committee's public WeChat account, all records fully accessible to any resident. I typed Zhou Jiangwo's full name into the search bar, and the official compensation breakdown popped up on screen clear as day, printed in bold black font for anyone to view. Total compensation payout, 5,124,000 yuan, split into 2 separate legal categories. Residential property registered under Zhou Jiangwo, 3,120,000 yuan. Premises owned by former spouse Lu Fang, deceased 2,004,000 yuan. My fingers froze hovering over the phone screen, my breath catching in my throat. I'd never once heard my mother mention she owned a standalone property inherited from my maternal grandmother, a 30 square meter small house in the old downtown district, fully registered solely under her legal name. She'd kept it hidden all these years, never transferring the deed over to my father, holding onto it as a secure inheritance meant exclusively for me. Before I could process the shock, my aunt Zhou Guilan's incoming call lit up my phone screen, her tone overly sweet and performative, identical to my father's strained warm act the day prior. "Minmin, your dad told you about the housewarming banquet next weekend, right? Come early. We'll have a big feast for all relatives." I cut straight to the core question without beating around the bush. "Aunt, what's the story behind my mom's property listed on the demolition notice, the one with $2 million in compensation attached?" Dead silence hummed through the phone line for 2 full seconds before she launched into a defensive lecture, avoiding the question entirely. What property? Don't make up wild stories to stir trouble. Your mother's been gone for years. You shouldn't fixate on money matters as a single young woman living alone. Your father's worked his whole life to provide for you. Just come to the dinner. Everything will be sorted out naturally among family. I repeated the official record plainly, no raised voice, no emotional outburst. The street committee's public notice has my mother's full legal name printed next to the $2 million compensation line. It's all documented in black and white. You can't pretend this doesn't exist. Her tone turned sharp and cold instantly, dropping the fake caring aunt persona entirely. Your father's handling all the legal paperwork for the demolition. He knows what he's doing. Don't interfere with adult financial affairs, or you'll become a laughingstock for the whole extended family. I hung up the call without arguing further, sinking back against my rental apartment sofa, my mind replaying 8 years of neglect and exclusion on a loop. 18 consecutive New Year's Eve spent as an invisible outsider in my father's new household. Every single holiday call rushed and dismissive. 0 invites to family gatherings. 0 updates on major life changes like house purchases and demolition negotiations. The second a 5 million yuan windfall lands in his bank account, he suddenly remembers he has a daughter to invite to his celebration dinner. Zhao Qing's unfinished comment about my mother's property lingered in my head nonstop for 2 days, so I took a half day off work to drive back to the demolished old neighborhood, lined with blue construction barriers and half-collapsed apartment buildings reduced to rusted exposed steel rebar. Aunt Shen, my mother's lifelong next-door neighbor, who'd visited Lu Fang's grave every single Qingming festival without fail, still lived on the adjacent intact street. The second she opened her front door and laid eyes on me, her eyes welled up with immediate tears, dragging me inside without giving me a chance to decline, rushing to boil water and cook a bowl of hand-pulled noodles topped with 2 poached eggs, exactly the way my mother used to make my favorite meal growing up. As I slowly ate the warm noodles, I asked her directly about the 30-square-meter property my grandmother left to Mom. Aunt Shen set down her chopsticks with a heavy clink, hesitating for a long stretch before speaking in a hushed, cautious whisper, afraid of any passing neighbors overhearing our conversation. That small house was your grandma's sole inheritance for your mother. Lu Fang refused to sell it for decades, even when your father complained nonstop about its inconvenient location. After your mother fell terminally ill, Zhang Wo rushed to remarry Wang Xiumei barely 3 months after the funeral. Everyone on this street suspected he'd been planning the marriage well before your mom passed away. I tilted my head, signaling her to continue, my heart sinking lower with every word. Wang Xiumei's cousin holds a senior administrative position inside the district demolition office. Zhang Wo struck up a close relationship with her the second the city released preliminary redevelopment plans for our block, counting on her internal connections to speed up paperwork and inflate the compensation value of both properties. Aunt Shen paused, digging a crumpled plastic bag out from the top shelf of her wooden storage cabinet, pressing it firmly into my palms. Inside sat a beat-up blue Nokia flip phone, the plastic casing worn smooth along every edge from years of constant use. Your mother dropped this phone off with me a week before her health rapidly declined, told me to hold on to it securely, and only hand it over to you if you ever needed proof for something critical down the line. She said this might become vital for Minmin someday. Don't lose it. I clutched the old phone tightly in my hands, unable to speak a single word. My mother had seen the betrayal coming long before her death, leaving behind this hidden evidence as a lifeline for me 8 years in advance. I left Aunt Shen's house, headed back to my rental unit, and ordered a universal Nokia charger online to power the dead vintage phone. While waiting for the delivery to arrive, I took Zhao Qing's father out for a hearty dinner with a bottle of rice wine, knowing he'd loosen up and spill all unspoken neighborhood gossip after a few drinks. Zhao's dad sipped his liquor slowly, shaking his head at the mention of my father's calculated rush to remarry. Zhou Zhangwo's always been shrewd and self-serving. He knew full well the entire old district was scheduled for large-scale demolition years before your mother's passing, so he sought out Wang Xiumei purely for her family's demolition office connections to streamline all property settlement procedures. I pressed him for details on my mother's inherited small house. Your grandma's 30-square-meter unit legally belonged solely to Lu Fang as her personal premarital asset. After her death, Zhang Wo attempted to transfer the deed to his own name, but incomplete documentation stalled the process indefinitely. Wang Xiumei pulled strings with her cousin to bypass standard inheritance formalities and lumped the 2 separate property compensation packages together under Zhang Wo's single bank account without informing you of your legal claim as primary heir. All the fragmented puzzle pieces clicked into perfect, devastating place in my mind. The millions in demolition money meant for my mother's daughter had been quietly siphoned off to fund my stepsister Zhou Shue's lavish lifestyle for the past 2 years, completely hidden from my knowledge. I pulled up every social media post Zhou Shue had uploaded over the past 24 months to cross-reference the timeline of her expensive purchases against the demolition settlement approval date. 2 years prior, a fully furnished 3-bedroom apartment in the provincial capital, market value roughly 1.2 million yuan, purchased shortly after demolition negotiations finalized. Zhou Shue had only worked entry-level office jobs with a monthly salary under 6,000 yuan, no possible way to afford the down payment and mortgage independently. 1 year prior, a fully stocked flower shop with high-end pink storefront decor, startup capital estimated between 150,000 to 200,000 yuan, posted as a 9-photo social media showcase. 6 months prior, a brand new white SUV with a total landing cost of 180,000 yuan, photographed outside her flower shop every weekend. Every single luxury item Zhou Shue flaunted online had been funded by my late mother's 2 million yuan inheritance, stolen from my legal rightful share without a single word of disclosure or acknowledgement. I messaged Zhao Qing later that night, asking her to sneak a quick glance at the member list of my father's secret family WeChat group she'd mentioned over hot pot, no screenshots required, just a simple written list of all participants. Her reply arrived 10 minutes later, cold and unflinching. Group name, our family. Group members, Zhou Zhengwo, Wang Xiumei, Zhou Shui, Zhou Guilan aunt. For people total, my father, stepmother, stepsister, and complicit aunt. No trace of me, no mention of my mother Lu Fong anywhere in the group roster. Zhao Qing added a follow-up line, asking if I wanted her father to forward archived group chat records, but I told her to stop digging immediately. The group's creation date listed on the screenshot snippet she sent alongside the member list read March 2018, exactly 3 months after my mother's December 2017 funeral. 3 months after burying his wife, he built a brand new family group chat, wiping both her and his biological daughter entirely out of the picture. The universal charger arrived 2 days later, and I plugged the ancient Nokia flip phone into the wall outlet, waiting 20 minutes for the faded green screen to flicker back to life. Most stored text messages were generic mobile carrier spam notifications, but the old built-in WeChat application retained every archived chat record my mother had sent 8 years prior, untouched and fully intact. I scrolled through the very first group chat my parents created back in September 2016, titled our home, only 3 members, Mom, Dad, and me. Her messages filled nearly every line of the chat history, notes about cheap market ribs, reminders to come home for homemade dumplings, updates on household utility bills, quiet gentle requests for my father to cover my university tuition fees. His replies were always short, dismissive one-word lines. Okay, got it. I kept scrolling backward until I hit December 9th, 2017, 19 days before my mother passed away from terminal illness. She typed an unfinished message into a different 5-person group chat that included my father, Aunt Guilan, Wang Xiumei, and the aunt's adult son. Still no space reserved for me as a member. The incomplete text froze me solid where I sat on my sofa, my vision blurring with suppressed tears. Minmin's tuition payment needs to be settled soon. She's too embarrassed to ask us for money this semester, this child. The message cut off mid-sentence, with a gray system notification directly underneath. You have been removed from the group chat by group owner Zhou Zhengwo. 19 days before she drew her last breath, my mother begged my father to add me into the family group chat and cover my overdue school fees, and he punished her by kicking her out of their shared family chat mid-sentence, silencing her forever. I closed the Nokia screen, wrapping it back into the crumpled plastic bag Anshin had handed me, and drafted a mental plan for the upcoming housewarming banquet my father had begged me to attend. Aunt Guilan had called that same evening to deliver my father's lowball settlement offer, spoken with zero remorse or consideration for my mother's stolen 2 million yuan inheritance, a one-time lump sum of 50,000 yuan, less than 1% of the total 12 million demolition payout. She warned me sternly not to create a scene at the banquet, citing my mother's spirit, would want me to act generous and forgiving. I stared at the number 50,000 written on a scrap of notebook paper, thinking of the half-finished sentence my mother typed 8 years prior, erased unceremoniously by the man she'd loved and trusted for decades. Generosity and forgiveness vanished the second he erased both her and me from his new perfect family for 8 long years, only reaching out the instant millions of compensation money landed in his bank account. I would attend the housewarming banquet the following Saturday, not to beg for a small cash handout, but to lay every hidden truth, every stolen asset, every act of deliberate erasure out for all 20 assembled relatives, neighbors, and old factory co-workers to witness firsthand. The old Nokia phone, holding my mother's unfinished last plea, would be my irrefutable core evidence to dismantle every lie my father, stepmother, stepsister, and complicit aunt had spent 8 years building to rob me of my mother's rightful legacy. The biggest upcoming reversal waiting to unfold at the banquet. My father's entire new family unit would crumble completely once the full extent of his theft and cold-hearted betrayal was exposed in front of every witness, and none of them would have any way to defend their selfish, exploitative choices. I showed up to the new high-rise apartment exactly on time, carrying only a small canvas tote slung over one shoulder. Inside sat the printed official demolition compensation paperwork and my mother's blue Nokia phone wrapped in its faded plastic bag. No gift, no fruit basket, no polite red envelope. I had nothing to celebrate in this space built entirely on stolen money and erased family ties. The front door stood wide open, music chattering loud enough to bleed into the hallway, 20 or more guests scattered across the oversized living room. Old factory co-workers of my father, distant maternal and paternal relatives, neighborhood elders, all milling around the custom leather sofas Zhou Shui had bragged about for months. Zhang spotted me the second I stepped over the threshold, rushing forward with an over-the-top grin, grabbing my wrist like he was performing for every set of eyes in the room. Min's here last. Come sit. Dad saved you a spot. He tugged me toward a tiny folding side table pushed off to the edge of the dining area, far away from the main round table where he, Wang Xiumei, Zhou Shui, and Aunt Guilan occupied the central seats. The main table held the best dishes, the largest wine glasses, all the attention. My small side table only had 2 unfamiliar distant cousins, quiet strangers I'd barely spoken to my whole life. I pulled out the folding chair without a word, sitting straight and calm, picking up a pair of chopsticks to stir the peanuts on my empty plate. All around me, Zhou Shui's high, bubbly voice cut through the chatter nonstop, drawing every guest's gaze to her and my father. Dad, that quartz countertop I picked out was such a good call. Everyone's asking where we ordered it. Your taste's always better than mine. Shua, worth every penny. Zhengwo laughed, pouring her a glass of fruit wine. Wang Xiumei smiled beside him, resting a hand lightly on his arm, the picture of a harmonious second family no one knew was built on stolen inheritance. Aunt Guilan grabbed a wine glass within 5 minutes of me sitting down, weaving through the crowd to stand beside my small table, her tone loud enough for nearby guests to overhear, preemptively framing me as the unreasonable troublemaker before I'd said a single sentence. Minmin, raise your glass to your father. He's worked so hard to get this beautiful new house. Let bygones be bygones. Don't hold onto old grudges today. Your mother would hate to see family fighting. I set my chopsticks down gently, meeting her performative, sympathetic gaze without anger, only quiet clarity. I'm happy for Dad's new home, truly. I just have a few simple questions I'd like everyone here to hear answers to. A hush rippled across the nearby group of relatives, several conversations dying off mid-sentence as people turned their heads to watch our exchange. I didn't yell, didn't slam my hands on the table. I spoke slowly, counting each large purchase out loud for the whole room to follow, glancing at the printed demolition numbers tucked inside my tote bag for reference. First, let's tally up how much of the total 5.124 million demolition compensation has already been spent. Jang Wo's grin faded instantly, his shoulders stiffening as he shot a sharp warning glare at me. Minmin, we can talk about finances privately later. Don't air this in front of guests. There's no private conversation left to have. This concerns my mother's legal inheritance. Everyone here deserves context. I kept my voice level, listing each cost one by one. This apartment's full purchase plus custom renovation runs roughly 1.8 million. Zhou Shue's 3-bedroom apartments in the provincial capital cost $2 million 2 years ago, right after demolition negotiations closed. Her flower shop startup cost around $180,000, and the white SUV she drives off every weekend landed at $180,000 after tax and registration fees. I paused, letting the numbers sink into every listening guest, counting the total aloud. All combined, that's 3.36 million spent solely on your new family's comforts and Zhou Shue's assets. Dad offered me $50,000 total from the full settlement, less than 1% of that 124 million total payout. A murmur rippled through the room, relatives leaning in to whisper to each other, their eyes flicking between Jang Wo and me. One elderly factory co-worker shook his head quietly, crossing his arms over his chest. Jang Wo slammed his palm lightly on the main dining table, his voice rising with defensive fury, fully leaning on patriarchal entitlement to justify his actions. This money came from the demolition of property I lived in for decades. I handled all the tedious negotiation paperwork. I get to spend it however I see fit. You live alone with no big expenses. Shue's got a whole life of weddings and business overhead to plan. 50,000's more than enough for you. Enough for me? I tilted my head slightly, turning my gaze to Zhou Shue, who'd gone pale the second I finished tallying her assets. Your monthly salary barely hit 6,000. No family financial support before the demolition money came through. Where did the down payment for your apartment come from, Shue? She shot to her feet abruptly, voice shrill with indignation, pointing a finger straight at me to shift blame entirely onto my supposed greed. You're being ridiculous today. This is Dad's housewarming. You come here just to demand money and ruin everyone's mood. I'm his daughter too. He's allowed to support me. You are his stepdaughter, I corrected flatly, and the 2 million chunk funding all your purchases legally belonged to my birth mother Lu Fong, inherited to her from my maternal grandmother long before Dad remarried anyone. I pulled the printed street committee demolition sheet out of my tote bag, holding it up so everyone in the room could read the split compensation breakdown printed in official black font. 12 million under Zhou Jiangwo's name, 2.004 million listed under deceased Lu Fong's separate property. The room fell completely silent, every guest frozen mid-conversation, wine glasses hovering halfway to lips. Wang Xiumei's grip on her teacup tightened until her knuckles whitened, her calm, polite mask cracking wide open. Jiangwo stumbled over his words, scrambling for a weak excuse to dismiss the official paperwork's weight. That old small house's legal hurdles all fell on me to sort out after your mom passed away. All the legwork was mine. Naturally, the compensation should stay with me. Legal legwork handled by your wife's cousin in the demolition office, right? I shot back, locking eyes with Wang Xiumei, who flinched hard and looked away instantly. Everyone in the old neighborhood knows you remarried 3 months after Mom's funeral specifically to leverage her family's connections to speed up settlement deals. Aunt Guilin rushed forward to cut off our back and forth, desperate to defuse the growing scandal before more damaging details spilled out. Minmin, don't drag Xiumei into this mess. It's just money disputes between father and daughter. Settle this behind closed doors. Think of your mother's memory. I am thinking of my mother's memory. That's why I didn't stop at tallying stolen cash. I reached into the tote bag, pulling out the crumpled plastic sack holding her blue Nokia flip phone, setting it gently on the edge of the folding table so everyone could see the worn, faded casing. This is the phone she left with our neighbor Aunt Chin 8 years ago. Told her to keep it safe for me for whenever I needed proof of what happened before she died. Mid-chapter major plot twist. The unfinished group chat message, 1,700 word marker, emotional climax beat. I tapped the power button on the Nokia, the faint green screen flickering to life, pulling up the archived old WeChat chat logs I'd reread dozens of times the night before the banquet. I didn't shout the words. I recited my mother's unfinished message slowly, every syllable clear enough to carry across the quiet living room. December 9th, 2017, 19 days before Mom passed away. She sent this into a 5-person group chat including Dad, Aunt Guilin, Wang Xiumei, and Aunt Guilin's son. The group never once added me as a member. I paused, glancing directly at Aunt Guilin, who shrank back a step, unable to hold my stare. The message read, Minmin's tuition payment needs to be settled soon. She's too embarrassed to ask us for money this semester. This child. A heavy beat of silence hung over the room before I delivered the gut punch system note printed permanently on that old phone screen. Right after typing that half-finished sentence, Dad removed her from the group chat entirely. She never got to finish begging him to help me pay school fees, never got to ask for me to be included in family discussions. A collective soft gasp swept through the assembled guests, several elderly relatives shaking their heads in open sorrow. One distant aunt covered her mouth with her palm, eyes glistening with sympathy for my late mother. Zhang Wo's face drained of all color, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the main dining table, unable to form a single rebuttal to the archived digital evidence he couldn't deny existed. He tried to dismiss the group chat as meaningless petty bickering, his voice thin and shaky. Your mother was unwell back then, confused about trivial family matters. I kicked her out temporarily to calm the tension. Nothing serious. Trivial. I repeated the word quietly, heart heavy with 8 years of unspoken loneliness. She was begging you to care for your own daughter, begging you to let me be part of our family's conversations, and you silenced her by erasing her from the group mid-sentence. 3 months after her funeral, you built a brand new family group chat titled Our Family. I pulled out the screenshot Zhao Qing sent me days prior, holding it up for everyone to read the 4 listed group members. Zhou Zhengwo, Wang Xiumei, Zhou Shui, Zhou Guilon. No Lu Fong, no Zhou Min 8 full years of that group's daily chats, every family decision, every celebration planned without a single invite or update sent to me. You only dialed my number the second 5.12 million hit your bank account, suddenly remembering you had a daughter to perform family unity for your housewarming guests. Aunt Guilon's cowardly complicity could no longer stay hidden. Every pair of eyes in the room locked onto her as I named her direct involvement in the secret 8-year chat. You sat in that group every single day for 8 years. You watched Mom's desperate message get deleted, watched Dad erase me from all family life, and never once reached out to tell me any of it. Never once asked him to add me to the chat or split my mother's inheritance fairly. Guilon's lips trembled, all her earlier loud family harmony, rhetoric vanishing completely, leaving only weak, broken excuses that no guest believed. I didn't want to stir conflict between siblings back then. I thought Zhengwo would sort everything out fairly eventually. Fairly? I let out a quiet, bitter laugh, gesturing around the expensive new apartment built entirely on my mother's stolen legacy. This space, Shue's apartment, her shop, her car, none of this would exist without the 2 million Grandma left Mom for me. You watched all of it get handed to a stranger's daughter and stayed silent for 8 years. Zhou Shui burst into loud, theatrical tears, clinging tightly to Wang Xiumei's arm as she sobbed, trying to paint herself as the wounded victim of my cruel public humiliation. Dad, look what she's doing to us. She came here just to ruin our happy day over money we never even knew was originally her mother's. Wang Xiumei patted her back mechanically, throwing a sharp, resentful glare in my direction, her earlier gentle housewife act fully discarded. You're being cruel to your own father over old property disputes. Can't you let the past rest? The past won't rest when you spent 8 years erasing my mother and me to fund your comfortable new life. I replied flatly, sliding the Nokia phone back into my canvas tote bag, finished laying out every piece of evidence I brought with me. I'm not here to beg Dad to split his personal 3.12 million yuan share of the settlement. I only demand the 2 million that legally belongs to my mother's sole premarital inheritance, meant exclusively for me as her first-line heir. Zhang Wo stared at me, defeated and desperate, all his performative fatherly warmth gone, only cold calculation left in his voice as he scrambled to bargain to save face in front of all watching relatives. How much do you want exactly? Name a number. We can negotiate privately right now. Don't drag this out in front of everyone. I already named the number I'm legally owed. 2 million yuan, every cent of Mom's inheritance. I slung the tote bag over my shoulder, ready to walk out of the apartment and leave the chaotic fallout behind them to resolve among themselves. No negotiation, no 50,000 hush money to sweep 8 years of exclusion and theft under the rug. I didn't wait for any of them to respond, stepping past the silent crowd of guests toward the front door, every pair of eyes tracking my path out of the apartment. No one called my name to stop me, no relative rushed forward to comfort or argue with me. They'd all seen the full, unfiltered truth laid bare, and there was nothing left to say in defense of my father, stepfamily, or complicit aunt. I pulled the apartment door closed gently behind me, stepping out into the cool residential hallway wind, the noise of their panicked, chaotic arguments muffled behind the thick wooden door. The chapter's pivotal fourth plot twist loomed immediately after this banquet exposure. Within 24 hours, my father, Wang Xiumei, Zhou Shui, and Aunt Guilon would flood my phone with dozens of desperate calls and pleading messages, alternating between threats of legal retaliation and tearful fake apologies to pressure me into dropping my inheritance claim. When I ignored every attempt to contact them, I would schedule a formal consultation with a licensed estate lawyer to send an official legal demand letter, kicking off the formal settlement process that would unravel their entire constructed comfortable life piece by piece. The stolen money wasn't the core victory waiting ahead. Justice for my mother's unfinished, silenced final plea would be the quiet, irreversible closure I'd spent 8 long years waiting to claim. I hadn't even reached the apartment complex gate before my phone started blowing up. Calls flooded in one after another, the caller IDs cycling nonstop. Zhou Zhengwo, Aunt Guilon, then Wang Xiumei, then Zhou Shui. I silenced the ringer entirely, stuffed the device deep inside my tote bag, and walked straight to the subway station without glancing once at the screen. The cool evening wind washed over me, stripping away the suffocating tension from the banquet living room. For 8 years, I'd yearned for even a scrap of my father's attention, but after reading my mother's half-finished plea aloud in front of 24 witnesses, that longing vanished completely. By the time I got back to my small rental apartment, my WeChat message list was overflowing with unread texts, stacked dozens deep. I set my bag down, brewed a cup of warm herbal tea, and only unlocked my phone once I'd settled onto the sofa, ready to parse their layered manipulation tactics one by one. First was a long paragraph from my father, sent 10 minutes after I left the building. Min, what you did today humiliated me in front of every friend and relative. We're blood father and daughter. How can you drag our family's dirty laundry out for strangers to watch? The 2 million was never meant to be fully yours. Your mother and I shared a life together. Half of that compensation belongs to me as her spouse. Come back tomorrow morning. We'll talk privately. I'll give you a larger sum than 50,000 as long as you promise to drop all this and never bring it up to anyone again. I scrolled past without replying. The law had clear inheritance rules, and his attempt to split my mother's sole premarital asset as marital property was entirely baseless. Next came 3 consecutive voice messages from Aunt Guelon, her tone switching between weeping sorrow and sharp reprimand mid-recording. Minmin, your dad's blood pressure spiked so bad after you left he nearly collapsed on the sofa. Think about how cruel you're being. He raised you all those years. Can you take a step back and accept 300,000 to settle everything? 300,000 is already far more than most girls in your position would get. Don't make everyone hate you forever over money. Wang Xiumei's message was shorter, icy, and unforgiving. You ruined our family's peaceful life for nothing. Shui cried all night. Her flower shop business will be ruined if we have to pull capital out to pay you back. If you press legal charges, we'll find our own lawyer to fight you until every penny is drained on court fees. The last entry was Zhou Shui's short, bitter text. You only care about cash. You don't care about anyone's feelings. I never asked for any of this money, but now my life is falling apart because of your obsession with the past. I took a screenshot of every single message, saved them to a dedicated evidence folder on my cloud drive, then muted all 4 of their chat threads. No point engaging with their circular guilt trips and empty threats. Talking would only waste my energy. My next step was formal legal action, not endless back and forth bickering. Mid-chapter. Consulting a licensed estate lawyer, 950-word marker. First key, plot movement. The next morning, I took half a day off work and booked an in-person consultation with a local law firm specializing in estate and real estate inheritance disputes. I brought every piece of physical and digital evidence I'd collected over the past 2 weeks. Printed demolition official notices with the 2 million split line, screenshots of the secret 8-year family group chat, the archived WeChat logs from my mother's Nokia phone, records of Zhou Shui's high-value purchases aligned with the demolition payout timeline, and full screenshots of all threatening messages sent post-banquet. The middle-aged female attorney flipped through each document methodically, her expression calm and professional the entire time she reviewed my materials. Once she finished sorting the stack of proof, she leaned forward across the conference table and laid out the clear legal standing for me step by step. Your maternal grandmother gifted the 30-square-meter property solely to your mother Lu Fan before her marriage to Zhou Zhengwo. This counts as exclusive premarital personal property under inheritance law, not shared marital assets. Upon Lu Fan's passing, you are the sole primary lineal heir to this asset's full demolition compensation of 2,004,000 yuan. Your father holds 0 legal claim to this specific portion of the settlement fund. I nodded quietly, already anticipating this ruling, but the lawyer's next statement sealed my resolve completely. All the large expenditures funded by this 2 million, your stepsister's apartment, vehicle, store startup capital, constitute unauthorized misappropriation of your inherited assets. We can draft an official demand letter served via registered mail to Zhou Zhengwo, requiring full repayment of the 2,004,000 yuan within 15 working days. If he refuses to comply after receiving formal legal notice, we will file a civil lawsuit with all your compiled evidence submitted to the district court. She paused, tapping the screenshots of their threatening texts and group chat records. These communications further strengthen your case. They prove your father and his new family intentionally concealed your mother's inherited property from you for 8 years and attempted to pressure you into accepting a negligible fraction of your legal entitlement through emotional manipulation and intimidation. I signed a service agreement on the spot, paid the initial retainer fee, and authorized the lawyer to draft the formal demand letter immediately. We agreed the document would list every piece of supporting evidence, lay out the exact legal statutes governing single-party premarital asset inheritance, and set a strict deadline for full repayment without room for lowball partial settlements. Before I left the firm, the lawyer gave me a critical piece of advice that became the story's 5th major plot twist. Do not respond to any private calls, texts, or in-person attempts to negotiate from them after the letter is delivered. All communications regarding the inheritance must be routed exclusively through our legal office. Any off-the-record compromise they push will be designed to trick you into waiving your full legal rights. I left the law office with a weight lifted off my chest. For 8 years, I had carried the burden of resolving this rift alone. Now a professional legal team would carry the burden of enforcing my mother's legal legacy. 2 days later, registered mail tracking confirmed the legal demand letter had been signed and received by Zhou Zhengwo at his new high-rise apartment address. Within an hour of the delivery confirmation popping up on my phone, Aunt Guelon showed up unannounced outside my rental complex lobby, carrying a canvas bag stuffed with homemade pastries as a fake peace offering. I spotted her lingering by the building entrance the second I walked back from my afternoon design studio shift. She rushed toward me the moment our eyes met, grabbing my wrist to block my path before I could step into the elevator lobby. Minmin, please listen to me just 10 minutes. I beg you. Your dad got the lawyer's letter this morning, and he's beside himself with panic. He's willing to raise the settlement offered to 800,000 yuan right now. 800,000, no small sum. Sign a simple waiver document and drop the legal process. We can all go back to normal family relations. I gently pulled my wrist free from her tight grip, shaking my head without hesitation. And the letter clearly states I am owed over 2 million yuan. That is non-negotiable. Any partial payout below the full amount is not acceptable, and I will not sign any waiver that surrenders my mother's inheritance rights. Her expression twisted from fake gentleness to frustration instantly, the pastry bag hanging limply at her side. You're being unreasonably stubborn. 800,000 cash is more money than most young women your age will earn in a decade. Your dad already poured most of that 2 million into Shui's living expenses. He physically cannot scrape together the full sum on such short notice. Are you willing to ruin 3 people's lives just for a piece of paper left by your grandma? Those lives were built on assets that never belonged to them in the first place. My tone stayed steady, no raised voice. They knew full well the money was my mother's inheritance, yet spent it freely for 8 years without a single word of disclosure to me. If they cannot repay the full amount within the legal deadline, the lawsuit moves forward automatically, and the court will order liquidation of Zhou Shue's apartment, shop, and vehicle to cover the debt. Aunt Guilan's face went ashen at the mention of seizing Zhou Shue's luxury assets. She'd counted on me folding for a partial cash payout to avoid dragging the dispute into formal court proceedings, and my unwavering refusal shattered her entire mediation plan. She switched tactics immediately, falling back on the same guilt-tripping rhetoric she'd used at the banquet. Your mother would hate to see you drag your own father to court over money. Can't you show a little mercy for the man who raised you? Mom spent her last days begging him to treat me fairly, and he erased her mid-sentence from the family group chat instead. Mercy was never extended to her, or to me for 8 years of exclusion and secrecy. I stepped around her, pressing the elevator call button, ready to end the conversation entirely. Tell my father all negotiations go through my lawyer's office from this point forward. I won't discuss the matter privately with any of you again. Aunt Guilan called after me as the elevator door slid shut, her voice shrill with desperation, but I didn't glance back once. That evening, Zhou Shue posted a long, emotional rant on her WeChat moments, omitting all context about the 2 million inheritance and painting me as a cold, greedy daughter hell-bent on destroying her father's retirement and her own budding small business. Wang Xiaomei liked the post instantly, and neither of them acknowledged the legal letter or their unauthorized spending of Lu Feng's funds in the comment section. I took a screenshot of the post and sent it directly to my lawyer as supplementary evidence of their deliberate public misrepresentation of the inheritance dispute. The attorney replied within minutes, confirming this social media smear would strengthen our position if the case reached court. 3 days before the legal repayment deadline expired, Zhao Qing reached out to me with shocking neighborhood gossip that formed the chapter's pivotal 6th reversal. Her father, who still kept in close contact with factory retirees including Zhou Zhengwo, had run into Wang Xiaomei's cousin, the demolition office clerk who'd fast-tracked the skewed settlement paperwork, at a street market that morning. The cousin admitted to Zhao's dad that Wang Xiaomei and Zhou Zhengwo had secretly begun drafting a separate counter-lawsuit full of fabricated claims that I'd abandoned my father financially for years to argue I forfeited all inheritance rights. Worse still, Zhou Shue had already attempted to sell her flower shop to a business partner for a steep discounted price in secret, hoping to liquidate the asset and hide the cash before the court could order asset seizure. The partner had pulled out of the deal immediately after learning the shop's startup capital was disputed inherited money, unwilling to get tangled up in a civil property lawsuit. I forwarded Zhao Qing's full account straight to my lawyer, who filed a pre-litigation asset freeze application the same afternoon to block Zhou Shue from selling or transferring any of her high-value properties before the court reviewed our case. That night, my father sent one final desperate voice message, all bluster gone, only raw panic in his tone. Minmin, the asset freeze notice came to Shue's shop today. If you don't call off your lawyer within 48 hours, she'll lose everything she's worked for. Can't we find some middle ground? I'm begging you. I muted the voice message without listening all the way through, opening the old Nokia phone one last time to stare at my mother's half-finished sentence on the screen. This wasn't a negotiation. IT was long overdue justice for the woman who'd spent her final weeks pleading for her daughter to be treated with basic decency. The clock ticked down on their 15-day repayment window, and if the full 2 million did not hit my bank account by the deadline, the civil trial would begin, unraveling every luxury they'd stolen and forcing them to face official judgment in front of a sitting judge.